This episode of Mr. Hutchings History is now streaming on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and all your favorite platforms like Castbox, Podcast Addict, and Amazon Music. Tune in now.
Welcome to Mr. Hutchings History, where the past comes alive. Let's dive into today's story.
Welcome to our deep dive, and today we're tackling a question that I feel like people are still debating even today.
Yeah.
Could the U.S. have shown Japan just how powerful the atomic bomb was
Right.
without actually draping it on a city?
Yeah.
We're going to go beyond the simple for or against
Totally.
and really dig into the nuances.
Absolutely.
We've got some really fascinating sources that you've sent us,
Yeah.
including excerpts from a podcast episode by Mr. Hutchings History.
Okay.
And he does an episode on this very topic.
Awesome.
So we'll use that and some other stuff.
That's great.
And really explore the different arguments, the historical pressures of the time,
Great.
and even get into like 4 different ways that historians view this decision.
Oh, that's so interesting. Yeah.
It's really fascinating.
Yeah.
What's so interesting about this whole question to me is that it's not just about the historical facts.
Yeah.
It's like it forces us to think about the ethics of it all
Absolutely.
and the strategic thinking of all these people.
It's like trying to step back in time and understand what it would have been like to face those choices.
Yeah, exactly.
Impossible choices.
So trying to get inside their heads.
Right.
Okay, so picture it.
Okay.
August 1945.
I guess 1945. Yeah.
World War II is coming to a close, but the U.S. has this terrifying new weapon.
They've just successfully tested it in New Mexico, the Trinity test.
Yeah, July 16th, 1945.
But the question is, how do you actually use something like that?
Right, right.
I mean, ending the war quickly was obviously vital, but the moral implications were just immense.
Huge, yeah.
Imagine being President Truman at that moment.
I can't even imagine.
The weight of that decision.
The potential for destruction was like nothing anyone had ever seen.
Exactly.
So let's get into some of the arguments for actually doing a demonstration.
Okay.
So you've got this group of scientists known as the Chicago Group,
Right.
with people like Leo Szilard and James Frank,
Key figures.
and they were just horrified by the idea of using the bomb on a city.
They were very vocal about it. They wrote letters. They tried to meet with Truman.
They argued that using it on a city would just totally damage America's moral standing.
Yeah, like on the world stage.
The world stage, exactly.
And they said it would make future peace efforts just that much harder.
Oh, for sure.
And they warned about, something really terrifying.
What's that?
A global arms race.
That's chilling.
And Glenn Seaborg, another member of the group, he spoke out against that too.
Makes sense.
They believed that a demonstration, like maybe on a deserted island, with Japan being warned,
So they know it's coming.
right, we know it's
Yeah.
coming,
Okay.
that would still show them the devastating power of the bomb.
Yeah. It's like
A chilling warning shot.
exactly. It's like, look what we can do.
Right, and that's where game theory comes into play, The art of strategic power plays.
Okay, I like that.
You achieve your objective, which in this case is Japanese surrender,
Right.
without necessarily resorting to the most extreme option.
Oh.
So you're using strategy and psychology, not just brute force.
Interesting.
And their vision went even further than that.
Okay, tell me about that.
They hoped for a world where this newly formed UN would help control this new force, this terrifying force.
So they were really idealists in a way.
Maybe.
Yeah.
But
right.
that idealism was a big part of their argument.
Yeah, okay.
They believed humanity could find a way to control this new and dangerous power.
I hope that kind of resonates even today, right?
Absolutely.
But then there's the other side of the coin, the counter-argument.
Right?
Truman and his military advisors didn't think a demonstration would work.
They really didn't.
Why not?
Well, they believed that Japan was so deeply committed to fighting.
But we're talking about horrific firebombing campaigns, right?
Exactly, like the ones led by General Curtis LeMay.
Brutal.
They were just devastating.
And they still wouldn't surrender.
Right, they felt Japan wouldn't just give up based on a demonstration alone.
Really?
Yeah, and remember the target committee?
Who were they?
Well, they were tasked with choosing potential targets.
Right.
And they had already picked Japanese cities
Oh, wow.
with very specific criteria in mind.
Like what?
They focused on cities that had military value, but that hadn't been firebombed yet.
So they hadn't been hit that hard yet.
Yeah, to ensure the maximum impact.
So they were taking this very seriously.
Oh yeah, they weren't messing around.
Wow.
And then there's the Potsdam Declaration,
Which one's that?
issued on July 26, 1945.
Okay.
It warned Japan of utter destruction if they didn't surrender,
Yeah.
and they didn't respond.
So their silence was basically defiance.
Exactly.
Like they were saying, bring it on.
Right.
But to really understand this,
Yeah.
we have to kind of step back and look at what was happening in Japan at the time.
Yeah, the situation there.
Yeah.
The cultural and political landscape of Japan in 1945 was incredibly complex.
Okay, like what do you mean?
Well, think about Emperor Hirohito's role, the influence of these military hardliners, and this deeply ingrained concept of fighting to the death.
Oh, yeah, I've read about that.
All of these factors, I mean, they really contributed to America's belief that a simple demonstration just wouldn't cut it.
Yeah, it's like they thought Japan would just keep fighting no matter what.
Right. They felt a demonstration wouldn't be enough to force their surrender.
So we've got this immediate dilemma.
Huge dilemma.
Just incredible pressure.
Yeah.
But now we need to kind of shift gears a little bit
Okay.
and delve into the historical debate.
The debate.
Because that's where it gets really fascinating.
It really opens up.
Yeah, there are at least 4 major schools of thought on all this.
Wow.
Each one offering, a unique lens
Unique lens.
to view this whole decision through.
And each one highlights how complex historical interpretation can be.
Oh, absolutely, especially with something as significant as this.
For sure.
So first up, we have the traditionalists.
Okay. The traditionalists.
Historians like Richard Overy,
Right.
they believe that the atomic bombs, as tragic as they were,
Tragic, but...
absolutely necessary to end the war quickly
Right.
and avoid a land invasion, which was called Operation Downfall.
Operation Downfall.
Imagine the potential carnage of that.
I mean, we're not talking about a small conflict here.
Yeah.
Estimates suggest 1 million American soldiers dead.
A million.
Yeah, and over 130,000 casualties expected just in the first months of fighting.
That's just unimaginable.
It's a level of bloodshed almost too horrific to comprehend.
The traditionalists are basically saying that a demonstration might have been completely ignored by Japan.
Exactly, especially given their willingness to fight on despite everything.
Yeah, even after the fire bombings.
Right.
Like they were saying, look, they've already endured so much, they're not going to back down now.
Yeah, they felt the demonstration wouldn't have the same impact.
Okay, but now let's bring in a different perspective.
Right.
The revisionists.
The revisionists.
Historians like Gar Alperovitz.
Okay.
They challenge the kind of accepted narrative. They really dig deeper, questioning what we think we know.
They're really good at re-examining things, challenging the conventional wisdom.
Yeah, and Alperovitz in particular, he argues that Japan was already looking for a way to negotiate a surrender.
Interesting.
And they were trying to do it through the Soviet Union.
Who were neutral at that point.
Right, exactly.
So they were already seeking a way out.
The revisionists are saying the atomic bombs were overkill.
Overkill.
A brutal show of force when a different outcome might have been possible. So they're saying the bombs weren't actually the deciding factor in Japan's surrender.
Yeah, it's a pretty bold claim.
That's huge.
It really forces us to reconsider what we thought was settled history.
And explore other possibilities.
Exactly.
Okay, now let's move on to the realists.
The realists.
With John Lewis Gaddis
Right.
as a key figure,
Okay.
they acknowledge that in the middle of a war,
Yeah. In the heat of the moment,
sometimes you have to act fast,
sometimes you don't have time to debate and discuss.
Right, exactly.
Swift action is necessary.
But they also see the long-term consequences.
Yeah, they're thinking about the future.
They're thinking about the future.
The ripple effects.
For ripple effects.
But in this case, the Cold War arms race.
It's chilling, yeah.
It's like a shadow hanging over everything.
They're trying to find that balance
They're-
between needing to end the war quickly, but also thinking about the potential for unintended consequences.
They're looking for a solution that addresses the immediate crisis, but doesn't create even bigger problems down the line.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
It is
So they're basically suggesting that a demonstration might have been a smarter move.
more strategically sound.
Terrifying, yes, but maybe without the same, moral fallout. So terrifying enough to force Japan's surrender, but maybe it wouldn't have led to this global nuclear arms race.
It's a thought-provoking idea.
It really is. Okay, so we've got traditionalists, revisionists, realists. Now, who else is there?
Finally, we have the diplomatic school
Diplomatic school.
with historians like PMS Blackett.
Okay.
They see the dropping of the bomb as, well, less about ending World War II
Oh, really?
and more about sending a very clear message to Stalin and the Soviet Union.
Oh, so they're saying it was actually the first act of the Cold War?
Precisely.
Wow.
They're suggesting that dropping the bomb was a way for the U.S. to assert its dominance on the world stage.
A power play.
Exactly.
But aimed at the Soviets.
Aimed squarely at the Soviets.
It's like they were saying, hey, look at what we can do.
Right. Don't mess with us.
But hold on. Earlier we talked about the Chicago group and how they thought a demonstration might have actually prevented a nuclear arms race.
Right.
But now the diplomatic school is saying the opposite.
Kind of, yeah.
They're saying that even just showing off the bomb, even in a demonstration, would have provoked the Soviets.
That's the paradox.
It is.
They're suggesting that a demonstration, just the display of that kind of power, might have been seen as even more provocative.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Would have been a direct challenge to the Soviets, potentially escalating tensions.
Okay, wow. So we're seeing how all these different schools of thought
Different lenses.
offer totally different interpretations.
Yeah, of the same event.
And it's amazing how one decision can be seen in so many ways.
That's what makes historical analysis so fascinating.
It's not about finding just one right answer.
No, not at all.
It's about understanding how complex the past is,
Absolutely.
the motivations of the people involved, and the unintended consequences that can ripple through time.
It's about seeing the bigger picture, the connections.
Yeah, and it makes you realize that history is never black and white.
Never.
There are just so many shades of gray.
It's all nuances and interpretation.
And it's up to us to examine the evidence, consider all the different perspectives,
Right.
and then come to our own conclusions.
Exactly.
And remember, these are just 4 of the major schools of thought.
Right, just 4.
There are so many other perspectives and nuances within this whole debate.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's take a step back for a second
Okay.
and try to imagine ourselves back in 1945.
Back in 1945,
In the shoes of the people who had to make this decision.
with the weight of the world on their shoulders.
It's just incredible the pressure they must have been under.
A world war raging,
Millions of lives at stake.
and this terrifying new weapon in their hands.
It's easy to judge in hindsight, knowing what we know now.
Oh, for sure.
But in that moment,
In that moment,
faced with an enemy that seemed determined to fight to the death,
determined to fight to the death.
this decision must have felt impossible.
An impossible dilemma.
Absolutely. And I think that's why this whole debate continues to fascinate and challenge us.
All these years later.
Yeah, it forces us to confront the complexities of war,
The moral dilemma
moral dilemmas,
of weapons of mass destruction.
and those unintended consequences.
The ripple effects.
That can happen even when you're trying to do the right thing.
Even with the best intentions.
So far in our deep dive, we've really just scratched the surface.
But yeah, we've set the stage.
We've looked at the arguments for and against a demonstration. We've talked about Japan's position,
Their commitment to the fight.
the pressure the U.S. was facing.
Absolutely.
And we've even considered these 4 different schools of historical thought.
4 different lenses.
That's a lot.
It is, but it's what makes history so compelling.
We're not just recounting events,
No.
We're trying to grapple with these big questions, the what-ifs,
What ifs?
that have really shaped the world we live in.
And that's what makes it so fascinating.
And speaking of what-ifs,
Oh, here we go.
in the next part of our deep dive,
Yes.
we're going to do something really interesting.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
We're going to step into an alternate timeline
An alternate timeline.
and explore what might have happened if the U.S. had chosen to demonstrate the bomb's power
Instead of using it.
instead of dropping it on those Japanese cities.
So we're going to play the what if game.
Get ready for some serious mind-bending.
I love it.
Yeah, it's going to be a wild ride.
I'm ready. Let's go. Welcome back.
Okay, so last time,
Yeah, we were talking about
we really got into the different schools of thought on the atomic bomb.
those different perspectives.
Yeah, and the debate over whether a demonstration would have worked.
It's fascinating stuff.
But I want to go back to the realists for a minute,
Okay, the realist.
because I think John Lewis Gaddis makes a really interesting point
What's that?
about how using the atomic bomb might have actually made the Cold War arms race even worse.
Accelerated it, yeah.
So it's not just about ending World War II, it's about what happened afterward.
It's about the ripple effects.
Exactly.
The unintended consequences.
The realists highlight how a demonstration, even though it would have been terrifying,
Absolutely.
it wouldn't have carried the same, moral weight
Yeah, the moral.
as actually dropping the bomb on cities.
I see what you mean.
And that moral weight, that shock to the whole world,
Yeah, that global shock.
it really contributed to the nuclear rivalry between the U.S. and the Soviet Union.
It upped the stakes.
So in a way, using the bomb actually created the conditions for a more dangerous world.
That's what the realists are suggesting.
It's like they're saying, okay, you wanted to end the war quickly, but did you make the world a safer place?
Right.
They think a demonstration could have achieved that goal.
Ending the war quickly.
But maybe also helped avoid some of the negative consequences down the road.
The long-term consequences, like finding that balance point.
A delicate balance.
Addressing the crisis without creating even bigger problems in the future.
Yeah.
It's a tough one.
It is.
Now, the diplomatic school takes this idea even further.
Okay, tell me about that.
P.M.S. Blackett. He's a key figure in this school of thought.
Okay.
And he suggests that dropping the bomb wasn't just about ending the war in the Pacific.
It wasn't.
It was a calculated move.
So we're talking about strategy.
Geopolitical strategy.
And power play.
Power play, exactly.
But aimed at who?
Think about 1945, the end of World War II.
Okay.
But tensions are already rising.
Between
the U.S. and the Soviet Union.
Oh, right.
The seeds of the Cold War are being sown.
It's all happening at the same time.
Exactly.
Wow.
The diplomatic school argues that dropping the bomb was a way for the U.S. to say, hey, look at us, we're a superpower now.
Like they're showing off their muscles.
Exactly.
But it's a message specifically for the Soviets.
They're saying, hey, Stalin, look what we can do.
It's like they're trying to intimidate them.
They're saying, we have this power, don't mess with us.
But wait a minute. Earlier we talked about how the Chicago group,
right,
they thought a demonstration might have prevented a nuclear arms race.
I remember.
But now the diplomatic school is saying the opposite?
It seems that way, right?
Like even showing the bomb, even in a demonstration, would have made the Soviets nervous.
Would provoke them, yeah.
So which is it?
Well, that's the paradox.
The paradox.
The diplomatic school is suggesting that a demonstration, just showing that power,
right, the display,
might have been seen as even more provocative.
I see what you mean. It's like you're deliberately trying to scare them.
Exactly. It would have been a direct challenge.
Like a
yeah, and that could have escalated things.
Made things worse instead of better.
Right.
Man, this is complicated.
It is. It really highlights how one event can be interpreted in so many different ways.
Yeah, depending on how you look at it.
Different lenses, different perspectives.
It's like we're looking through a kaleidoscope.
Each twist shows you a different pattern.
We've got the traditionalists saying it was necessary
to end the war.
The revisionists saying it was overkill.
Right.
The realists focused on those long-term consequences.
The ripple effects.
And the diplomatic school saying it was all about power politics.
Sending a message.
It's amazing how one decision can be seen in so many ways.
That's the beauty of historical analysis. It's not about finding the one right answer.
Yeah, it's not a simple equation.
It's about understanding the complexities,
the nuances,
the motivations of the people involved,
and those unintended consequences that can just echo through time.
It's about seeing the bigger picture.
Okay, I need to take a breath.
Me too.
Let's try to put ourselves back in 1945 for a second.
Okay, back in time.
Imagine the pressure those guys were under.
Unbelievable pressure.
A world war raging, millions of lives at stake.
The fate of the world in their hands.
And they've got this new weapon, this terrifying new weapon.
The power to end it all.
It's easy for us to judge, looking back.
Of course, with hindsight.
But in that moment, faced with an enemy that just wouldn't quit.
An enemy willing to fight to the death.
This decision must have felt impossible.
An impossible dilemma.
And I think that's why we're still talking about it today.
It's a question that continues to fascinate and challenge us.
It makes us think about war, about morality.
About the choices we make.
And the consequences that follow.
Those ripple effects.
Even when we're trying to do the right thing.
Even with the best intentions.
So far in our deep dive, we've really explored a lot.
We've covered a lot of ground.
The arguments for and against a demonstration.
Right.
The historical context.
The pressures they were facing.
And those 4 different schools of historical thought.
4 different lenses.
It's a lot to take in.
It is, but it's what makes history so compelling.
Yeah, it's not just about memorizing dates and names.
It's about grappling with the big questions.
The what-ifs.
Exactly.
That shaped the world we live in.
And that's what makes it so fascinating.
Oh, okay. And speaking of what-ifs.
Oh, here we go.
In the last part of our deep dive, we're going to do something really interesting.
I'm intrigued.
We're going to step into an alternate timeline.
An alternate timeline.
Yeah, and explore what might have happened if the U.S. had chosen to demonstrate the bomb.
Instead of actually using it.
Instead of dropping it on those Japanese cities.
Wow, that's a big one.
Get ready for some serious mind-bending.
I'm ready. Let's go.
Okay, so we're really going down the rabbit hole now.
Down the rabbit hole.
What if, instead of dropping the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki,
right,
the U.S. had just done a demonstration?
A demonstration of power.
Yeah. Would that have been enough to end the war?
It's a question that historians have been debating for decades.
Would it have changed everything? Would we be living in a different world today?
We can't go back in time, unfortunately.
Right.
But exploring these possibilities, I think it really helps us grasp the magnitude of that decision.
And all the potential consequences.
Yeah, all those ripple effects.
Okay, so imagine this alternate timeline.
Okay, I'm imagining.
The U.S. warns Japan about a demonstration, maybe on some remote island,
Okay.
and they basically give them a front row seat to just how powerful this weapon is.
They get to see the devastation firsthand.
Yeah, what happens next?
Well, it's impossible to say for sure, but
Sure.
let's consider a few scenarios.
Okay, I like it.
One possibility is that Japan, just seeing this incredible destructive force,
Yeah,
they're overwhelmed with fear,
they realize they can't win.
and they surrender immediately.
War's over.
Countless lives are saved. That's the best case scenario, right?
That's what everyone wanted, to end the war.
To end it quickly and decisively.
And
right?
save lives. Exactly.
But what if it doesn't work out that way?
Right. There are other possibilities.
A more complex.
More complex paths.
Okay, like what?
Well, what if the demonstration, even though it's shocking,
Yeah.
it doesn't actually break Japan's will to fight?
So they're still determined to
Yeah.
keep going.
What if those military hardliners, the ones who were already committed to fighting to the death,
Right, the ones calling the shots.
they convince Emperor Hirohito that they can still win?
So the demonstration backfires.
It's possible.
It makes them even more determined to resist.
That's one potential outcome.
Okay, that's scary.
Or maybe the demonstration creates a stalemate.
A stalemate.
Japan is horrified, yes,
Okay.
but they refuse to surrender unconditionally.
They're not giving up completely.
And the U.S., they don't want to launch a full-scale invasion.
Right, because that would be a bloodbath.
Exactly, so they're stuck,
The war just keeps dragging on.
potentially leading to even more casualties.
On both sides.
A tragic outcome.
Yeah, really tragic. And then you have to consider the long-term consequences.
Yeah, the ripple effects we keep talking about.
How would a demonstration have affected the relationship between the U.S. and the Soviet Union?
That's the big question, right?
Would it have changed the course of the Cold War?
Some historians think that even a demonstration
Yeah?
might have made the Soviets even more determined to catch up.
To develop their own atomic bomb.
They see that America has this incredible weapon,
And this terrifying power.
but they also see that the U.S. hesitates to use it.
They don't want to unleash that level of destruction.
So maybe it emboldens the Soviets.
Makes them more ambitious.
And the arms race just accelerates.
Like a runaway train.
So in trying to avoid one conflict, the U.S. might have accidentally created an even bigger one.
It's a sobering thought.
And we can't forget about the moral implications of a demonstration, even a demonstration.
Right, even a warning shot.
It's still creating this devastating weapon, showcasing it to the world.
Some people would argue that just doing that, it crosses a line.
A line humanity should never cross.
It's a heavy burden to carry, that knowledge.
Knowing that your decision could have such far-reaching consequences.
Consequences that ripple through time.
But we can only speculate, right? We can't go back and change things.
No time machine, unfortunately.
We'll never know for sure what would have happened if they'd made a different choice.
But that's what makes history so captivating.
Yeah, it keeps us thinking, keeps us asking questions.
It's not just about memorizing facts and dates.
It's about those big, unanswered questions.
The what-ifs that haunt us.
And using those questions to try to understand the world.
The world we live in today.
So we've come to the end of our deep dive, and wow, we've covered a lot of ground.
A lot of ground.
We looked at the arguments for and against a demonstration,
The historical context,
different schools of thought.
different perspectives.
We even went down that what-if rabbit hole.
It's a deep rabbit hole.
You've got a lot to think about.
A lot to ponder.
And remember, history isn't just a bunch of old stories.
No, it's a living thing.
It's the choices of everyone who came before us.
And those choices, they shape who we are today.
They shape how we see the world, how we make decisions.
And as we've seen, sometimes the biggest questions, the most important questions,
Don't have easy answers.
they don't.
It's about the journey, the exploration.
The willingness to question, to be open to different perspectives.
To embrace the complexity of it all.
That's what makes history so fascinating.
So keep questioning, keep learning, and keep exploring.
And maybe, just maybe, we can learn from the past.
And create a better future.
That's the hope.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Mr. Hutchings History. Keep exploring, and we'll see you next time.